Ohio State, Notre Dame. Our national championship game is set. It's Monday night. It's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in the shadow of the assassinated Georgia Dome. 7:30 Eastern kickoff on ESPN. I have in my hand a paper popper of a stat that I had to check Jesse on. He brought it to me, and I said, Jesse, that's not right. Crunch the numbers again. And he said, crunch. He's pressed a button. Same thing. That's how numbers get crunched. The average margin of victory in the college football playoff championship game. The playoff era, the championship game, allegedly the two best teams in the country. What is the average margin of victory in those games? We've been doing this over a decade now. The average margin of victory is 20.1. So you know how everyone always tells you on the morning of a game when you're walking around the tailgate area or you're in Home Depot and you're about to go home and watch the game kick off and you're just making small talk at the gym or something. Someone says, oh, I don't know who's going to win. It'll be a good game, though. It'll be a good game. There's never a guarantee any game's going to be a good game. We score in 3s and 7s. These players are really good. Any game could get lopsided. Case in point, like every championship game. So one of the byproducts of this expanded playoff I'm not crazy about is maybe it filters out the teams that would have been blown out. And maybe we're guaranteed more close games at the end. Maybe. I know that's a working theory amongst many of you. There's a perception, and then there's a reality as we get into this game. So the perception is Ohio State's the heavy favorite, and they are. I agree that they should be. FanDuel right now has the line Ohio State minus 8.5. That's the perception. The perception is Notre Dame's got to do a lot to overcome this. That's the perception I have too. So I share this. Here's the reality. They met, 14 or 15 months ago? Yeah, I'm pausing. I want to make sure everyone remembers that. They did meet. I was there. Maybe my favorite game I've ever attended, all things included. Weather, venue, atmosphere. It was Ohio State. It was at Notre Dame in South Bend. Like 70 degrees, clear blue skies at kickoff. 17-14 was the final. Ohio State won there at the very end. It was like a walk-off, basically. So, how do you do that again if you're Notre Dame? Well, Josh, that sounds weird. Why would they want to do that again? Well, they want to do half of it. They want to find a way to keep Ohio State under 20 points. So that's my starting point here. As I mentioned the other night, Notre Dame, to me, has to find a way to make 20 points win this game. Sounds like a preview from the 60s. It's great. This game could go by in like 2.5 hours. How do they do this? Because they've done it recently. They've held Ohio State under 20 recently. Texas played that kind of game the other day. Now, Ohio State ended up with 28. 7 of those were defensive points. So, right around that 18, 19, 20, 21-point threshold, that's where Texas held Ohio State. Buckeyes still won. Okay, Notre Dame, for all we know, they could hold Ohio State to 19 and lose 19-6. I'm not saying this guarantees anything, but what's the path for them? Okay, clearly, it's in their best interest to hold them 20 or less. I think they have to win the DB wide receiver matchup. So we made a lot, and we continue to make a lot, of how much man coverage Notre Dame plays. Out of all these teams in the playoff, they give more man looks than anyone. No one else is bothered to even try that against Ohio State. I assume that Notre Dame will stick with what got them here. I will also assume that Ohio State will stick with what got them here, and that means Ohio State trusting their receivers to win individual matchups and make plays, and that means Al Golden and Marcus Freeman trusting their guys to win contested balls, to play the ball well in the air, to force receivers to reroute, to get as physical as a group of DBs have gotten with these receivers, to tackle well, so yards after catch at a premium. That sounds good, talking it here. Sounds good. It sounds easy. It's a lot tougher. Ohio State, I don't think, will stop leaning on their strength. So they have just exploded through the air in the postseason. I don't think they'll stop leaning on that, which means if you're going to get it, if they're going to deal their fastball to you, you don't have to knock it out of the park. You at least have to foul it off. I've worked an alarming number of baseball metaphors into the playoff previews lately. No one's pushed back on it, so I'm going to keep on going. You just keep fighting them off. Keep fighting them off, or at least put the ball in play. Because what could happen is it could be a 4-3 put out to end the inning. It could go through the second baseman's legs. It could hit a pebble on the infield. A lot of things can happen. What can't happen is boom, 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 3 gut shots, you're down. We can't have that. So in football terms, that means you can't let happen to you what happened to Oregon on Ohio State's opening drive, where I mean, Will Howard hits Jeremiah Smith on, what was it? Man, the stat sheet makes it look like a 70-yard touchdown. No, it was about a 3.5-yard dump pass that went for 70 or so, and that's because they couldn't tackle him. It's hard to do. But you're Notre Dame, so you got to find a way to do it. Also, they've got to affect passes. So this is the other thing that may not play out in a series, but it's got to play out over the span of 4 quarters. The reason Notre Dame is able to win, the reason they're able to come out on top is because they can force turnovers, but they ultimately, you can call it affecting the passer. I just call it affecting the pass because that could be any of a number of things. That could be getting pressure on the quarterback and sacking him. That could be forcing a quicker release. That could be getting your hands up as a defensive lineman in passing lanes. That could be a linebacker that reaches out and has that ball go off the tip of his finger, but it redirects the ball just enough to where it falls in the waiting arms of a safety. You just got to affect passes. And then you let the chips fall where they may. But you can't give up uncontested stuff. You can't suck at tackling. Notre Dame doesn't. And so that is one thing that has to go right for Notre Dame. Now, given all that, even if you do limit them, you will not shut them down. I don't believe anyone will shut Ohio State down. So they're going to get points somehow. You hopefully limit them. But on the other side, you got to score. This is where Ohio State holds all the cards in their hands. Because to me, the most important unit in the game is Ohio State's defensive front, their defensive line. Because they could slam the door on the game. They could shut Notre Dame out. They are good enough to where 17 points on the other side, it's good enough. You just give us 17, you give us 20, we'll shut them down, and we'll deliver the game for you. They have allowed 62 yards rushing per game in the playoff. They have accumulated 16 sacks in the playoff, so they can totally take over this game. Notre Dame's left tackle is out. Notre Dame's got a starting guard who is questionable right now, and even if they were healthy, this is just a tough unit to deal with. So you've got to find ways. I don't care. I mean, Texas did not run the ball statistically great. Grading on the curve, I thought Texas did a halfway decent job in the second half of running the ball. Again, grading on a curve because they put some drives together. They kept falling forward. It wasn't disastrous. It wasn't like Oregon. Oregon couldn't run it at all. Texas ran it well enough to stay balanced. I'll put it that way. Well enough to where it didn't completely get lopsided. Notre Dame, okay, the other thing they need here is they need the explosive play to reemerge. They're number 14 in rushing this year, but it's been kind of limited in the playoffs, which is crazy because they've won anyway. But remember the Indiana game? Love had that big explosive run, but it really hasn't shown up a lot past that. Now, they haven't needed it because they play a very complementary style. And if that shows up again against Ohio State, okay, ignore what I'm saying. I just think it takes a little bit more to beat Ohio State respectfully than it does the other teams you played so far. They need the explosive run to reappear. Don't need 5 of them, but 1 or 2 of them would help greatly. And then, you know what would be a nice bonus there is if Riley Leonard found a couple of more of those 30-plus yard passes like he found last game, because that surprised me a little bit. What do you have, Jesse and Colin? A 54-yard touchdown pass, had a couple of more passes of 30-plus yards. So that'd be nice. I'll tell you what else would be nice while I have you here. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of you may be watching the preview video, but you don't watch the show regularly. I humbly invite you to. It's free. This is just college football all year. When you subscribe to the channel or the podcast, it doesn't cost you anything. It just helps us, greatly helps us. So appreciate you watching or listening and would appreciate you subscribing. Okay, so the whole middle 8 concept. Producer Jesse and I had an argument today. It's a mild argument. I am of the opinion that anyone who watches college football commentary, NFL commentary, or broadcasts, you've heard the term middle 8 a lot, to the point where people roll their eyes when they hear it. Okay, Jesse thinks most people haven't heard of that concept. So you know what? If you have, bear with me for 2 seconds. If you haven't, that's news to me. Very simple concept. But Notre Dame's owned this category, the middle 8 concept of last 4 minutes before the half, first 4 minutes coming out of the half. And right now, they're on like a generational middle 8 run in the postseason. They lead college football in middle 8 points scored. They lead college football in middle 8 points margin. Two examples right in your face over the past few weeks. Against Georgia, when they entered the middle eight, so we're talking about 4 minutes or less to go in the first half, coming out of the second half, the first 4 minutes. When that period started against Georgia, it was 3-3. When that period ended, it was 20-3. Notre Dame never looked back. Against Penn State, they trailed 10-0 going into the first part of the middle eight. They are 10-10 tie coming out of it. That is a 27-0 run their last couple of games in that middle eight portion. So here is a piece of advice to Ryan Day. I'm not going to give Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles much advice. They don't need it. But one humble, very humble piece of advice to Ryan Day is if you guys win this coin toss, defer. Find a way to take the ball in the second half. Again, that's free. They don't need it. Jerry Emig does not need to send me anything. I don't need Jesse. I don't need you to send them a bill. I'm giving that to our friends in Columbus free of charge. No one calls any penalties against your opponents, so I at least feel like I owe you one free piece of advice. Individual matchups have to be exploited for Notre Dame. Feels like a Notre Dame heavy preview. It's because it is. I think a lot of the default edges go to Ohio State here. I'm not wasting a whole lot of time talking about the edges Ohio State has. They are plenty. So there are many, many paths. If we go back to our old standby analogy of fanning out a deck of cards, and there are 52 of them, and those 52 cards are 52 examples of this game playing out, most of those cards carry an Ohio State win. There are a few of them that have Notre Dame wins, but those cards require many things to happen, or at least a few big things to break Notre Dame's way. One of them, of course, turnovers. To me, that's so obvious, we haven't even put it in the preview. Notre Dame's been great at that. They need it one more time. They did not need it against Penn State. I remember very vividly, you guys don't have to remind me, I remember saying, I don't think you guys can afford to get 2 possessions down and not win the turnover battle. And sure enough, you did both and you won. Well, I'm going to double down on that. I don't think you can afford either of those against Ohio State. You have to, if you don't slow them down, okay, you don't have to shut Ohio State down. Find ways to produce some fruitless drives. This is like a grab bag. Notre Dame just needs some of this stuff to come out. Fruitless drives, of course, are either forced turnovers late in the drive or they're turnovers on downs, forced late in the drive. But you can have Ohio State put up 175 on the ground. You can have Will Howard throw for 240, 280. You can have all that happen as long as you got a couple of 9, 10, 11 play drives that result in no points. Or maybe you held them to 3. That's okay. That's a bend but don't break, yes, but that's okay. You can win like that. Special team scores, we've seen it already, would be nice. Tilt the field position heavily in your favor, that would be nice. Penalties are a total wild card in this game because of the aforementioned mind-boggling stat, frankly, for both your teams, but with Ohio State especially. If you missed the other night, 134th out of 134 teams in the country in opponent penalty rate. Nobody ever commits penalties against Ohio State. It's just fascinating. Like game-wrecking defensive linemen right now. 16 sacks in the playoff. 0 holds. No one's held them. No one has so much as gotten hands on an Ohio State defensive lineman jersey. So that plus individual matchups being exploited, there just flat out has to be some edges that aren't glaring that Notre Dame has to find. Before I get to what the model thinks about this game, I know a lot of you are going to this game. Congrats, because that's a wonderful thing. Many more of you want to go to this game. I can only give you advice. If you're on the fence about doing it and you can afford it, do it, because you're buying a memory. You're not just buying a ticket. But I do have very, very good news for you. We wrapped this up right before the show today. I'm going to get you $100 off your ticket purchase. There's no catch on this. You don't have to sign up for anything. You go to SeatGeek to buy your tickets if you're going to buy them. If you're holding out and you're going to buy them, go to SeatGeek. I can't get them to you for free, but use the code PateState100. I am getting you $100 off. Okay, we had to pull some very big strings. Like we had to pull some ropes on this, not just strings. Because as you can imagine, if several of you take part in this, it's a pretty big chunk of change that SeatGeek has left on the table. So, national championship tickets, they're there. The market's there right now. It's pricey. I know it is, guys. And if you can't swing it, you can't swing it. But if you are thinking about it, SeatGeek is your place. Pate State 100. You can tell your friends who don't even watch the show. If you're buying tickets, SeatGeek, Pate State 100. Okay, Colin, what does the model think about this game? Because it has been brought to my attention that the Penn State game, the model had Notre Dame winning by 3, and I picked against it. And what was the final score? I don't even want to tell myself. So, are we going to go against the model again here? The FanDuel line right now is Ohio State minus 8.5. Our model is nearly dead even with that. Ohio State minus 8. There is, and you listen to me closely, there is not a Notre Dame fan alive who has interacted with the show that wants me to pick Notre Dame at this point. Probably one of the biggest things they have going for them right now would be if I picked Ohio State to win this game. So I have one of two choices, really one of three choices. I can follow the model, I can follow my heart, or I can ignore all of it and just go full heel mode and yell "Go Irish" and dance around like Lou Holtz. No one here to catch me, or not Lou Holtz. I wonder what Lou Holtz is doing right now. No, I'm not Lou Holtz. I meant Lee Corso. I could do all those things, but I'm not going to, because as flawed as my heart has been on Notre Dame games, I still have to follow it once more. I think Ohio State's going to win this game. I can't even say it with a straight face. I think Ohio State's going to cover as well. I'm so sorry, Marcus Freeman. I'm so sorry. And I'm saying that in the event that Notre Dame wins this, because no apology will be big enough. I understand already that our reputation as a people of picking Notre Dame games is already in the trash. But if they win the national title, honestly, I don't think that the relationship would be able to be repaired. I don't know. On the other hand, Ohio State could win by 20 here, and all would be forgotten. See, this is the spot we were in last year. Last year, I was on a generational cold streak picking against Michigan, but I made it right at the end. And I picked them to beat Washington, and they did, and no one even remembers it now. No one remembers it. So, this is where I'm landing. I'm picking Ohio State to win the game. I'm picking Ohio State to cover. In my mind, this game is like 23-13 or something like that. That's where I see it. And you know I never predict scores. I think that's foolish. It's already hard enough to just pick winners. Don't predict scores. Never do that, kids, except I just did.